This was published in the Weekly Review yesterday. Privatization secrets. What's the motive behind the idea of avoiding Parliament with regards to the act that was signed by President William Ruto on privatization, penned by Jaindi Kisero, and he gives us a bit of historical context. Underneath there, it reads, new authority could open the floodgates for corrupt elites to grab public assets. And so in November 2010, then Finance Minister Uhuru Kenyatta nominated new commissioners and presented the list to the Finance Committee of Parliament for vetting. The confusion in the running of parastatals occurs because responsibility is shared and spread between too many competing authorities. I see here investors from the Gulf are reportedly scared of the long approval procedures that a potential investor has to go through. An image here of the National Treasury Cabinet Secretary, Njuguna Ndongo, and the National Treasury is a shareholder in all parastatals and approves their budgets. President William Ruto showed keen interest in the privatization space right from the beginning of his administration. Boards of parastatals are staffed with too many ex-officio members representing the Line Ministry, National Treasury, Attorney General, and Harambee House, and an ex-officio member representing the Ministry of Trade and Investment has also been introduced by the new act. So he raises several questions just highlighted there by these images. I appear to have lost that page. Let me just flip over. There we go. I'll start with you, Mark Bichachi. Initially, the vision with the Privatization Commission was that there would be a level of autonomy, that they would not operate as parastatals do, which, as Jaindi has stated, he has staffed with ex-official members from the parent ministry and all of that, and treasury and all of that, that they would have some, there would be somewhat, okay, let me just state it how I state it. There would be some level of autonomy, right, in guiding which institutions are privatized or not. But in January, the president called out the commission saying that, well, they're just eating money, doing no work. So now the act as it stands, I suppose maybe to address some of these concerns by the investors from the Gulf, as has been reported here, is to bring down the bureaucracy. And so Parliament does not have a say in the approval of, in approvals of the privatization process. And I will look at the act, I have it open. But generally, your thoughts on privatization secrets, what is the motive, in your view, behind the idea of avoiding Parliament?
Well, you know, up to a few months ago, I used to sit on a board before Arnold's boss degazetted me. So I have quite a lot of experience in this particular field. So first and foremost, I do not think at all that there are too many ex-officio members in boards. Why? Because in my experience, those members represent what the interests of government are in those boards. Because most parastatals run the risk of running amok if they're not put back in line with the interests of, one, their parent ministry, two, the Treasury, which spends money there, three, the Attorney General, because they do enter into contracts, they do enter into agreements, both local and international, as arms of the government of Kenya. So you do need the Attorney General there represented to ensure that the agreements and the contractual obligations that these institutions get into are in the best interest of the Kenyan people. And I can go down the line as to how each participating ministry is important. It is also critical to understand that parastatals are different from sitting on a commercial board, and I've done both of these things. When you sit on a commercial board, the interest is only profit 90% of the time, whereas in a government board, in a parastatal, there is interest about the good of the nation, the good of the people, increasing the interests of the people and ensuring that you meet those particular demands. So there is a lot to do with parastatals that needs to be thought about very carefully. But at the same time, to go back to the law, it is Parliament that actually comes up with the acts to create these parastatals. There are very few parastatals that are created by dint of executive order. For example, the Export Promotion Agency was created by a notice from the presidency. However, most parastatals are creations of acts of Parliament. So my question is, how can the thing that created you be removed from the process of how you change how you operate? That is not how life works. It is quite unclear to me why Parliament should not be involved in making sure that these parastatals, when they are sold not only legally, but however they are sold, will still maintain the public good that these institutions deliver. This is a very important point, because when you commercialize an entity, you need to be very careful to ensure that the people who take it do not take it to the detriment of the public good. That is very critical. And remember, most of these state organizations operate in the monopoly space. So it is quite dangerous for you to privatize something that does not have competition, because then the prices are likely to go up, because that is the incentive of a publicly listed traded company or a privately owned company. So there's a lot of things to consider, and who is the person entitled to consider that? It is Parliament. So Parliament created it. Parliament has the role of oversight, even though it has abdicated that role in this particular incident. And I can tell you for free, if there is a slight mishap with this, we will create oligarchs in this country. Just the same way as we have oligarchs in Russia, it's the same thing that will happen in this country. We need to be so careful with how we deal with this organization, who takes it over, how much of it is taken, and there's history behind this. Remember, Safaricom, okay, had issues about a 12% that is owned by an unknown person, and we claimed that it is certain ex-presidents. We have had issues with Kenya Power, when it is said that the Kenyattas have owned a big chunk of it for a long time. So it is not the first time where privatization has brought issues. We should be very worried as a people when the people's watchmen have willfully said that yes, there is a potential of thieves coming in, but we have decided that from 3 to 6 a.m. in the morning, we are instituting sleep instead of watching over the nation.
Okay, Ishmael, and I'll quote something from this particular report, but on Saturday, Raila Odinga, speaking in Kitui, said Parliament has been pocketed. Now, he previously raised concern with regard to this privatization law. But before we get into that, Johnny Kisera tells us the law President Ruto approved this week wanted to circumvent. Okay, sorry. This is the snag the drafters of the law President Ruto approved this week wanted to circumvent. So he gives us a history of where this idea of the commission came from, that it would have commissioners, and so they would undertake these decisions, as I said, with some level of autonomy. The list of names that had been presented by Uhuru Kenyatta by the National Treasury was not, okay, in November 2010, let me start there. Then Finance Minister Uhuru Kenyatta nominated new commissioners and presented the list to the Finance Committee of Parliament for vetting. It rejected them on the grounds that the nominations did not reflect ethnic diversity. For nearly 2 years, the commission could not function because the National Treasury did not nominate a new set of commissioners. The secretariat of the commission, a full bureaucracy, was rendered idle, gobbling taxpayer resources for nothing. This is the snag the drafters of the law President Ruto approved this week wanted to circumvent. Instead of executive director, the CEO will be a managing director in place of a privatization commission. It is a privatization authority, implying that the institution handling the sensitive duty of selling state assets has to be grouped with entities such as Lake Basin Development Authority, Kerio Valley Development Authority, and even some commercial state corporations such as Kenya Ports Authority and the Kenya Airways Authority. So it seems like it's been a balancing act to achieve the objective without necessarily subjecting the process to unnecessary bureaucracy.
Yeah. Olive, why did we create parastatals in the first place? And I just wanted to refer, I mean, I'm conscious of your time and constraints of time. They are saying that in 1963, parastatals were established by the country because of a national desire to accelerate economic or social development, to redress the regional, and this is very important for me, to address the regional economic imbalances, increase Kenyan participation in the economy, promote indigenous entrepreneurship, and promote foreign investment. The whole purpose for why parastatals were created is so as to at least be the arm that can generate benefit, or rather do business with the public, look for donors and sponsorship, have enough funding. For what reason? Not so that commissioners can enrich themselves, but so that people in Baringo, with all that flooding, Budalangi, whatever is happening in marginalized areas in Kajiado and Northeastern, should benefit. Now, it appears that until 2010, 2012, 2013, people started to realize that the purposes for which we created parastatals is not being realized at all. So the president, I remember Uhuru Kenyatta then, set up a task force to look into governance and management in these parastatals. And you have seen something called Mwongozo.
Yes.
So that, paper came up and it became now the policy. Have principal secretaries, cabinet secretaries, have they followed this Mwongozo document? They have not. In fact, that's why you see we have a tiff between person of Chief of Staff Kosgei and the other gentleman for Mudavadi. If Kenyans who are elected and appointed into office were to follow these proposals and look at the objectives for which parastatals were formed, we would not be having these things, Olive. But because of the failures, of course, if you look at Mumia Sugar Company, honestly, I mean, the president has to come up and really issue very serious, tackle it from a very high level and say, there are 3 things you have to do. Because he realized the reasons why Mumia Sugar Company was created are not being realized. Not the locals, they are not enjoying. Citizens, we are not enjoying. Government is not getting anything. So I think there are 3 things you must do. Now, I think the whole objective of the president and Kenya Kwanza on this particular aspect is correct, is good, is on the right direction. You can't have commissioners in an office. They earn a lot of money, in the range of 800. Then I don't know, including sitting allowance, and somebody's going home with 1 point something. So, and then out of such a parastatal, you don't have a benefit for Kenyans. We still have jiggers infesting people. We still have lack of water. We have flooding. We have, livestock diseases. So I think on this, they have the right direction. But Olive, now, you ask, what is the position of law? Privatization Act. Okay. Initially, so, it was 209.
Can we come back with that? Because I need to take a quick break.
Yes.
Quick break, and then Arnold, I know you want to weigh in on this as well. But we'll come back. We'll come back.
You are taking a break before.
Just when I was about to actually deal.
Well, Arnold, immediately after Ishmael concludes the position of law, we'll get your thoughts on the same. I have the act open here before me. We'll take a look at those details. All right, welcome back to AM Live. I did promise that I would give Arnold Maliba an opportunity to give his input as well. And Ishmael, you had something on law, but if you could do it in as little time as possible. So that,
no, all I'm saying, Olive, is the new law is now cascading downwards the commission to become an authority.
Yes.
And their concern with that is, you feel exposed. The issue of security of tenure is not there. Therefore, possibility of being independent as an authority really is neither here nor there, considering that there will be no requirements that you do the appointments or reporting. I don't know the new law. I am an advocate, but I would be honest, I need to read the new law because it has been a bill until last May, July. So, but there is a talk from what we've seen on media that Parliament has been sidestepped, and again, that is very wrong. If that is the correct position of law, that is very wrong. Okay. When you reduce authority from the level of a commission to an authority, it's very wrong. Then, of course, about the other facts, we can come back to discuss in terms of whether really it's politically correct or wrong to rampantly sell these parastatals to private entities.
Okay, so I'm just going to take us through, and Arnold, I'm coming to you. As drafted, so this is what Section 30. During the preparation of a privatization proposal, the authority shall undertake consultations on the privatization to be implemented under the privatization program. The consultations under subsection 1 shall include engagements with experts on technical matters related to proposed privatization, any employees or officers directly affected by the proposed privatization, the host community in the area where the entity to be privatized is located, and any other relevant stakeholder. Upon preparation of a privatization proposal under Section 30, the proposal shall be approved by the board and submitted to the Cabinet Secretary for approval. Upon approval of a privatization proposal under Section 31, the determined and approved method of privatization shall be effected in the manner specified in the second schedule. 33, the authority shall undertake a valuation for each privatization to assist in the implementation of the privatization proposal. The valuation shall be performed by a qualified person appointed by the authority. Restrictions and obligations for privatization, that's the next part of things. Then Section 35, a state corporation to which this section applies shall not allow the assets of the public entity to be dissipated, incur any liabilities other than the ordinary course of business without prior approval, written approval of the Cabinet Secretary, disclose information other than publicly if there is a reasonable risk that the disclosure would give an advantage to a person who might compete in the privatization. A state corporation undergoing privatization shall not undertake any new capital investment or disposal unless approved by the Cabinet Secretary. And it goes on. Let me see. Yeah, so essentially, on the issue of oversight, balancing oversight versus curing bureaucracy. Your thoughts, Arnold?
First of all, just quickly, Mark said my boss fired him or degazetted him. I'd love to meet him after this so that he then actually apologizes on behalf of the boss. I didn't know it was that painful. So, boss, wherever you are, you needed to have called Mark.
Being publicly fired is very embarrassing. Even your grandmother calls you and says, no, on social media, people are trolling me thinking I've moved from where I stay because I'm now broke.
But it's a job. You should expect to be fired.
In Auma, my friend.
That particular decision should have been done with a little bit of grace. But then, of course, Mark is an ancient of this sector. Him and I have served in boards before, so he knows that sitting on a board, you serve at the president's mercy.
Pleasure, yeah.
Is actually at the president's pleasure. But I'm sorry for that. The president should actually have ensured that it's done with a little bit of grace. Yes. But moving on quickly, Olive, I would love to disabuse this particular fact. First of all, there's been a general reporting in the media that the government insists to sidestep Parliament in privatization of public entities. I need to actually state it and put it on record that it is not possible to do any dealing about public stuff of this particular level without going through Parliament. So I know the thinking, and Jaindi Kisero is actually an ancient of, is one, what I would call, permit me to call him, one of those business journalism gods. Generally, Jaindi is a god in journalism, so big. I remember at 19 years old when I came here on second floor, and God bless that old chap down there called Amos Ngaira, who accepted and gave me a little bit of work as a correspondent then, and I bumped into them. When I looked at them, they looked so huge. But this is the point. No one is going to avoid Parliament. You are not going to privatize without going to Parliament. This is what has happened, and we needed to actually have reported well, because the business of building angles, I know we changed that thing from the days of yellow journalism where we used to do slants and now we do angles, the hook upon which you're hanging on the story, but this is it. When we actually remove this thing from being a commission, the only bit that we are taking away from Parliament now, and which I felt, and which generally actually feels like out of practicalities, because there's a decision that has actually, there is experience that informs that, is when it was the Privatization Commission, it means that the members, the commissioners that were coming in, we had to take them to Parliament. And there was a lot of horse trading and pooling, and the bureaucracy was so long. But you see, the Privatization Commission was not an independent commission. It's not. So it's not one of those you will say that it's a protected one. So when it becomes an authority, it means that it's going to work like any other parastatal. Well, not necessarily any other, but it means that when the government is appointing members, they will not go to Parliament as in the days when it was the commission where Parliament had to look at the names, consider the names before, the approval of the names before they are made commissioners. That has actually been a bureaucratic hurdle here. And bureaucracy, ineffective registries and the length that is actually government is actually the commas and the corners that actually ensure that things do not work very well. So it is not true that in privatization, government plans to sidestep parliament. It is not even possible. You cannot even think about that. But the writers of headlines, for the good reasons they actually want, so that we sensationalize and run away with these things, have actually been selling the idea and the general framing that William Ruto plans to avoid parliament when it comes to privatization. You've said so well that, of course, in privatization, we are doing away with the bureaucracy. It takes so long. And by the way, it is so specific on the issues that really need to be tackled or what should be privatized. Number one, non-strategic agencies. You know, we've got all manner of, I think we have got about, not necessarily 200, but they are heading to, not 400, but it should be about 367. What we did with Mwongozo didn't even go through. We came up with the GOE bill, went to Parliament, and then we shelved it, the government-owned entities, to re-look at the State Corporations Act. That didn't go so well. We looked at the changes that were there. The things that Nyaribo was speaking about should have been worked out well in the GOE bill. Because board members, a lot of them just get, and by the way, Nyaribo really needs to know, and I think after this, Mark should actually tell him that what you get as board members on parastatals, except for the chair who gets a retainer, and by the way, it's for 80,000, and because he pays ITC2, he ends up with 56,000 shillings. True. Board members, specifically a lot, and a lot of boards are actually service class 3 on boards, they get a sitting allowance of 20,000. It's taxed and you go home with about 16,000 if you're given a lunch of 2,000. Yeah. And you're not sitting every day, you're not sitting every week. Sometimes some boards only sit thrice or 4 times a year. Fact. People who are called board members here and directors can actually have big names, but those people might get about 100,000 shillings out of that big name they have per year. A whole year, you are called a director, but you don't get so much unless you have got a trip. Those are the issues that the GOE bill was seeking to heal, that we pay directors so that then we do away with the interest in these small things. So it's not true, Olive, that government plans to sidestep parliament. It's important for us to emphasize that. It is at the appointing level of the members that will sit on the authority. It's now like any other parastatal. Treasury works around that. And then, of course, that particular authority is subject to parliament. Whatever they do is subject to parliament. No one can sidestep parliament. That particular notion has been sold. So everybody thinks out there that government is now running around it, just wants to sell government assets without going to parliament. It's not possible. The same parliament that passed this law has got even Azimio members who would actually not have allowed this to go through, including Kenya Kwanza members of parliament who wouldn't allow that. You can't give the executive a free hand. So as it is, let us actually correct that. Otherwise, these kind of headlines really sell. It becomes so difficult to clean this mess. These damages are very difficult to work out. So people have a notion that William Ruto now is going to sell assets without going to parliament, yet he will be going there. The only place that is changing, and it's important to emphasize that as a commission, members who are going to sit there, let me use the word board members. So the commissioners had to go to parliament and parliament had to approve. Now as an authority, strictly under the State Corporations Act, means that the ministry, and that is Treasury, that is actually responsible for that, actually appoints the board members, and once it's actually done that, you don't need to go to parliament the way we gazette all these other board members. So it's not sidestepping parliament. It's so big a statement to say that they are sidestepping. And when you look at the story and how it is written, it actually comes out like we are looking at what could go wrong. Mm-hmm. We're not looking at specifically what the bill seeks to cure and to heal. We are not looking at the challenges that have been there to necessitate the new bill. Okay. We want to bring in, and it's good. I know that the road to hell is actually
paved with good intentions.
Is actually punctuated with very good intentions. So, can we also talk about the good intentions in the bill before we talk about the possibility of what could be wrong?
Sorry, Andrew, I just wanted to kind of support your view, but I'm also conscious about the time we have. I just want to mention this. I mean, when you showed for example, Section 30 of the Privatization Act, look at Section 42. I've just been reading them when you were actually scrolling them right here. Look at Section 41, where a proposed privatization may result in an unregulated
monopoly.
The authority shall subject to the Competition Act, what? ensure the agreement, blah, blah, blah. Then B, seek the approval of the cabinet secretary on agreement. Let me tell you, normally the law has intent, and then there's a way it socializes with the people, and then there's the outcome. The fact that you are not having Parliament supervise this, and you have delegated it not to the authority itself or the commission, but to the cabinet secretary. I mean,
this is not a new provision in that law.
No, it's okay. I'm just.
It's not a new
it's okay,
provision.
Arnold, you've made your case.
No, he's actually derailing what actually
No, I'm just speaking for my.
Okay.
This is not a
Wait.
new
No, Mark.
provision.
Olive, let me
This
say
is not
this.
a new provision.
That's
It's
okay.
been before.
Let me
This is
say
not
this.
new.
That's okay. We are now discussing the new provision as it is in the Act.
He's
Whether
pegging on that.
it has been brought in, the fact that the authority the powers have been removed from the commission to an authority, the way this section will socialize with the authority and the people will be disadvantageous, because the final apex, the authority to decide, will be the cabinet secretary.
Not
and that's where the
true.
catch
Another
is.
concern
Not true.
raised in this particular...
Because a cabinet secretary is subject to Parliament. In fact, the president himself and the business he does,
Okay.
the people's representative, which is the house on Parliament Road, the two houses, it is not true, and we should not sell. That is honestly.
Let's.
Okay, Mark, let Mark...
You know, Arnold is being quite clever in how he's putting his words. What we want as oversight is this, that when something is about to be privatized, when this institution has created the valuation, the process, and all of those things, we want that document taken to Parliament, not to the cabinet secretary, simply because when there are 300 plus people discussing an issue that matters to 50 million Kenyans, you're more likely to get balanced views than taking it to one cabinet secretary to make that decision. And also, let us remember, there is a difference between Parliament being involved and Parliament coming back to check whether you did the right thing. Those two things are very different. For example, if an institution, the cabinet secretary has approved for it to be sold, and then you are saying that Parliament will participate during question time when the minister is brought before Parliament, that is not the oversight we want, okay? We want Parliament to be part and parcel of the entire process. We want them to approve the list of companies that are being sold. We want them to know and approve what is a strategic asset for the country and what is not. Whether it can be sold via monopoly or it has to be broken down so that it has competition. That is the kind of oversight we want. And no one should argue and say that that kind of oversight is taking too long. There are things that you do that you must take as long as possible. It's like getting married. If you meet someone today and you marry them tomorrow, we will all be worried. There needs to be a process, and that process is good for this country.
All right. If I may, Ishmael, and I'll come to you.
Just a moment.
Arnold, because I have some other questions I want you to address. So something else that Jaindi raised is to do with, while the old Act provided 8 slots for independent directors, the new Privatization Act has reduced the number, I believe he meant to add a 2 there, the number to 4. An ex-official member representing the Ministry of Trade and Investment has also been introduced by the new Act, which begs the question, what is the motive behind this idea by the Cabinet of keeping approval of privatization transactions away from parliamentary scrutiny? Conspiracy theories abound. First, the Ministry of Trade and Industry recently held a record number of investor conferences in capitals of rich Gulf countries and received the feedback that many sovereign wealth funds from the region were interested in privatization deals here. The investors from rich Gulf states were scared of the long approval procedures and processes which a potential investor interested in a privatization deal in Kenya has to go through, including the risk of being dragged before Parliament to be interrogated by those pesky parliamentary committee members.
Yes. First of all, it's just important to say this, Olive, that number one, a coin has got 3 sides. At least now that I'm an old person, I know it's not 2. There are 3 sides. And if you discuss just one side of the coin, you might miss the others. Like, for example, the Act speaks about the prescribed manner of privatization. We've not looked at that entirely. We are looking up here and talking about the stage at which the executive is dealing with that. you know...
Where would you like me to move?
Just a moment. You know that when you are dealing with anything that pertains to public affairs, we will go to public participation. That act has not... That's why I want to lead you somewhere.
Okay.
The act has not shielded us from oversight, has not taken away that. Because you see, what was happening is that... and Mark, as a person who sat on a parastatal board, will know that some of these issues are easy said out here, and some of these decisions are actually being informed from experience. So, what we are talking about here is a small part of that. It's one side of the coin, that this is the process. And a lot of these provisions here are not new with what was the old act. It was the same. And I need to repeat, the only place where Parliament, and that is micromanaging, that Parliament is going to appoint the commissioners, has to give the approval. The privatization process will still go back to Parliament anyway, because you cannot do that outside of the laid out way, the constitutional way of doing things, that the people must take part and parcel of this. And he speaks about independent members. Mark has been there. I'll also refer to him. He knows how difficult it is to actually have quote-unquote independent members who actually have been outsourced. They've come in, and they have been gazetted already, the gazetting framework and everything that works around there. So the so-called independent members, the Privatization Commission was not an independent commission. I need to say that. You only have got independent commissions where it starts with I, or clearly the Constitution speaks about them. And you realize that sometimes even where I is there, it's actually silent in some instances, if you can actually remember the Cherera 4. So the Privatization Commission was not an independent commission. What we are trying to make is that the traditional board working framework, now that we have got an authority, is normally more fast. It's more quick. The other processes do not change. I'm telling you, when you say that the cabinet secretary can make a decision on his own, it's not true. And they've actually clearly said that loss-making, I just need to surprise you, that you'll actually have government entities that are loss-making, but because they are parastatals, somebody can come in every single day, do nothing, and be paid by who? By your own taxes. So efficiency, bringing in actually more capital, ensuring that the sector of production, we move this from the private sector, the public sector, and give it to the private sector. So we know all those good things, but we are busy splitting hairs to look for the bad ones. What could go wrong? Not that it is there, but we are already hypothesizing.
I think you should be fair.
So,
okay, all right.
The time is so short.
All right.
I
So
mean, you should be
Ishmael,
fair.
and
The point here is honestly,
the
this
time
act
could be short.
Yeah,
But I've got two mouths against one.
okay.
No.
No.
You don't carry anybody's mouth.
They are moderate. They are
This is my,
moderate.
let me tell you,
Where?
this is my point. This is a new piece of legislation. It honestly gives cabinet more power than parliament. We can read it afresh if you like, and call us here for a specific show to cite those sections, and with Arnold being here. But my point was clearly when you cascade downwards, and he's saying the previous commission was not independent. Honestly, I mean, if it's called a commission, but you have more information that it is not what it looks like, that is not really the correct...
definition of independence in
it's okay.
law.
It's okay. I agree with you, Arnold. You've met your point. Now, the fact that these boards, you said, they don't take money. By the way, I want to say this, Mark. Olive, I never go along with the camera. I sit in boards, and you may not know that. I'm the chairman for the Law Society of Kenya Budget and Finance Committee. It's a statutory board. And I am looking forward to sitting at the Judicial Service Commission to represent the LSK if the members endorse me. I understand that you don't go really to make big money in sitting in a commission or in a board, definitely. But what we are trying to say here is the aspect of independence that comes with an independent commission. Fine if you say that the previous commission was not independent. I will not labor, to try to correct that. But the point, Olive, if privatization in Kenya was meant to be, why are you selling this cap? Because it is not giving you money. Then where are you taking the money? We have run on defining what privatization is. We've not discussed about how corruption is taking advantage of the privatization. Who actually is buying these organizations? Finally, where is the money being deposited? Is it in a suspense account or it's in a development account? Where is the money going? And that is what Kenyans are complaining about, that if you allow a minister, for example, or a cabinet to be in charge of privatization and not Parliament, then we will not be able to account for where this money has actually gone.
Although the Act does speak about the proceeds and all of that, and if there's an objection and how the public may participate in
that's right. I was just saying that's what we should have
the
really...
acquisition of these entities. But Mark?
You know, I want to correct my friend Arnold, and there's something in this country that we really, really need to cure. Number one, to critique is not to hate. Mm-hmm. To be corrected is not to be disliked. And since they like the Bible, even God himself says, the son he loves, he chastises. So when you're being chastised, it is an act of love. It is not an act of rebellion. We love our country. That's why we speak. Now, here's the thing. The devil is in the detail. And trust you me, to poison anything, it does not need to be 99% poison. It is 1% poison, 99% water. We are addressing the 1%. I am one of those people who honestly believes that some of these government entities need to be sold. For example, this number of hotels they own in Mombasa and Kisumu, all over the country, that cannot compete, they're outdated, government does not want to invest in them. Sell those things 100%. In fact, sell the railway too, because it would be better served if people were... That's a different story. But how it is done, the oversight of that, the transparency of that, ensuring that the people are carried along is something that is sacred, not only just in terms of our constitutional framework and how it was done, but also so that the public is protected, because parastatals, some of them are so critical. Let me give you an example of a parastatal that was privatized. There's something called Kenya Power. You can go today and buy shares in Kenya Power. Fine. But when Kenya Power makes a mistake, the whole country feels the pain. So you cannot say that the issues of privatization are to be taken lightly. It is the reason why, for example, in Kenya Power, in Kenya Commercial Bank, the government maintained a certain percentage so that the government could continue to have a say in those institutions, because they are critical to the economy of this country. So let's be clear. We are not fighting this process. We are critiquing the process, as we should do as loyal, patriotic members of this society.
All right, so I'll have to end the conversation there. But I'm hearing a lot around issues of transparency, even with the telecom deal, the newly instituted deal. There's still questions that arose out of that. But we will continue our interrogation. We do not end there, because this is part of our duty as the press, and that is to interrogate, to analyze the good, the bad, and the ugly. We even haven't touched on the port of Mombasa or the sugar millers and leasing and concessions and all of that. But we continue the conversation another time. My name is Olive Burrows. We've had in studio Mark Bichachi, communication strategist, Ishmael Nyaribo, who says he will go read this act in detail, and next time he comes he will be quoting provisions, advocate and political analyst, public policy analyst Arnold Maliba, who says you have to look at what was there before and what is there now and what really has changed. Thank you for joining us on AM Live. Your world coming up.